Oh hey, sorry, I'm just looking for the reason for all the hype around these. Magista turned into Phantom Vision, while Hypervenom turned into Phantom Venom. Take those two boots, throw them in a blender, and 20 seconds later, you'll end up with these. The brand new Nike Phantom GT Elite, this being the low-cut variation, a boot that takes over for both the Venom and the Vision Phantom lines, meaning that Nike's lineup is now reduced to 3 separate silos rather than 4, and also a football boot that is being touted as this technical marvel from Nike, when in reality, it's a lot more simple than you might expect, all for the usual low-cut top-end football boot retail price of $250. Nike is a brand that really thrives off of new ideas and new technologies that they do an excellent job of marketing to the average consumer, which is why there's always a ton of hype around a brand new Nike release, and the Phantom GT is no different. From a technical standpoint, Nike would lead you to believe that this is one of the most high-tech football boots they've ever created, and maybe that's true. But when you break down the reality of what exactly is happening here, there isn't a single element that is truly unique or at the very least different from Nike football boots that we've seen in the past. There are a lot of returning elements here, and while that's not necessarily a bad thing in terms of the overall performance, it's a little bit misleading based on how the boots have been marketed. So if you'd like to learn the truth of what the Phantom GT is actually all about and what they're actually like, that's exactly what we're going to go over in today's video, including how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, watch the entire review, and if you're interested in a pair of these for yourself, I'll leave a little pop-up on screen, or you can click the first link down below. That's going to take you to the review page on my website, where you'll find buy it now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes, where you'll be able to pick these up below their normal $250 retail price. Also, if you guys do end up enjoying this video and want to see reviews of the takedown models, don't forget to support this one with a like. And if you're new here watching for the first time and don't want to miss out on weekly content on everything football boots, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Got really official there. Hit that subscribe button. As far as extras go, like any other top-end Nike boot, it does come in the gray and black Nike box. And for those that are curious about the size tag label, there it is. Pause the video if you want to read that. And then inside the box, along with the boots, of course, they also include a string bag, which as you can see is in matching colors. It's a white bag with black strings, but you can see in a silver base with some black and white detailing to kind of match the texturing on the upper. You have a large GT logo, and then the Nike swoosh and regular Phantom GT logo in a pink color with nothing on the back. It's actually a really cool looking string bag design, and the colors in general I think look quite good. It gets a string bag rating of GT out of GTR. And no, that was not a plug for the Car Problems YouTube channel, but this part is. Now the boot is called the Phantom GT, and people are really fixated on the GT part of the name, thinking that it's some kind of automotive tie-in. This has nothing to do with the Ford GT or the Carrera GT or the AMG GT or any GT car for that matter. The GT actually stands for generative texturing, which as you can see very clearly on this white colorway highlighted in black is a bunch of little lines that make up a texture that Nike have generated through science, basically. Basically what Nike did is they took a football boot, and I'm sure with a bunch of fancy cameras and scanners and programs, they generated a texture for optimal control and touch, where the pattern of the texture itself varies depending on the specific part of the foot to create the optimal amount of grip and feel for the ball. That sounds exactly like the Magista Obra 2 marketing spiel, but we're gonna ignore that. This is the Phantom GT and it's all new. The end result is a very soft and flexible Flyknit upper with no real padding to it that's heavily textured in the form of these little lines that are very strategically placed in all different directions to allow for what is, according to Nike, optimal grip on the ball. They are definitely promoting this as more of a control boot. And to be honest with you guys, along the lateral side, they all seem to be flowing in a very similar direction. There's not much of a pattern happening, but you can definitely see here on the medial side, because it's highlighted in black, there's a very, I guess, specific positioning of all these little lines that I'm sure they spent a lot of money and effort to generate this particular pattern. So there's some legit science here, but then if you look across the top of the foot where the Nike swoosh swoosh is, which is obviously very important for Nike in marketing their boot, you'll notice that all of that generative texturing goes out the window in place for some very generic ridge texturing exactly in the shape of a Nike swoosh. Now, I'm no scientist and I'm not a big conspiracy theory guy either, but isn't it interesting that they generated this very specific texture pattern for maximum control, and smack dab in the middle of it all, they ended up with the shape of a Nike swoosh. That observation aside, the texturing itself is quite significant and definitely different than what we've seen from Nike before. What they're claiming is that the texture is actually molded into the Flyknit base rather than just being on the surface Nike Skin top layer, which is kind of how we saw texturing implemented on Phantom Vision 1 and 2. And I guess that's what this compares to most closely from a texture standpoint. It's just more significant. If you run your finger along the texturing, it's not so rough to where you could like sand a piece of wood or something, but it's definitely uncomfortable. I will say that on the ball, the texture itself, you can't really pick out more or less grip depending on which part of your foot makes contact with the ball, because the texture pattern does change quite significantly. It's a little bit more heavy here, but it feels like there's just as much grip in this area of the foot, just as an example. And I'll also say that it's not a sticky type of grip similar to something like the Predator 20, whether it's a 20 plus or a 20.1, which features, of course, those rubber spikes. Those have a stickier feel. This is more so an amount of grip that you're going to notice mostly when kind of dragging the ball across your foot, and it's allowing for some significant friction and kind of contact area across the surface of the upper. Upon striking the ball, you're not going to find that it feels really sticky. And again, if you've worn the Phantom Vision, this is kind of just a more heavily textured variation of that in terms of the amount of grip on the ball provided, which again, not a bad thing, but not something that I think is going to feel totally different and unlike anything else you've ever worn before. As for the Flyknit upper, it is as simple as we've seen from Nike in a long time. It's pretty much just a regular Flyknit upper that's very, very thin. Similar in thickness, I would say, to that of the Mercurial. It has no padding to it whatsoever. Obviously, you have your Nike Skin top layer, which does have all of the texturing as well. And then internally, you're gonna find a very similar liner to the Mercurials as well, kind of this synthetic material that is super, super thin. So the end result is an upper that's very soft, it's very flexible, it doesn't feel overly structured on feet, and the shape of the boot is a little bit weird depending on your foot type, so I'll point that out a little bit later in the video. But as a whole, the upper doesn't require any break-in time, it's very thin, it's very pingy, and for a control boot, like I said, it does have more of a barefoot sensation than what we had from both the Venom as well as the Vision, which of course this replaces. So that's something definitely worth noting. And then as you can see, detailed here on the medial side of the forefoot, the boots also feature ACC technology. So if there's like a tornado or something, you should be good. An element taken from the Phantom Venom, but really relating more so back to the Hypervenom days from Nike, specifically the Hypervenom Phantom 1, you'll notice that the boot does have an off-centered lacing system, with the laces being pushed mainly to the medial side of the boot. So you are left with a cleaner area to strike the ball with, which I'm personally a big fan of, and the lacing system does run nice and deep. No more lace covers, which of course were found on the two previous variations of the Phantom that this replaces. It does of course use a dual lace hole setup, and you'll also find that the central portion of the upper is also made out of Flyknit, except it's left fully exposed and obviously elasticated, which is kind of what we're used to seeing from Nike and a lot of brands that are doing these one-piece knitted uppers. Really nothing special about it. It's just elasticated Flyknit. And of course that flows into the heel area, this being the low cut variation. There is a mid as well, where you can pay an extra $25 for them to add a little bit of material that does absolutely nothing. I would recommend saving the money because the construction in the heel is identical, no difference in fit whatsoever. They extended the back ever so slightly, which is nice in terms of just being able to put them on a little bit easier just because you have something to grab onto. Otherwise, you don't notice this side bit whatsoever. It does feature an internal plastic heel counter, which is a little bit flimsy in my opinion. It definitely could have been a little bit thicker or sturdier in general. And then internally, the heel liner is very straightforward in terms of what we're used to seeing from Nike, a nice synthetic suede material with plenty of padding. Again, very similar to what we currently see on the Mercurial series. And then internally, you'll find the insole is fully removable, features a very standard kind of mesh liner on the surface and is made from a single layer of this yellow foam with a harder white foam insert in the middle that has a very particular texture pattern. Again, something shared with the Mercurial line. That same pattern is kind of debossed into the base of the outsole itself, which this still has a sole plate, even though it kind of looks like a split sole. And that's basically so this pattern can kind of interlock underneath your foot to help hold the insole exactly in place so it's not sliding around. Really cool idea, and again, something taken directly from the Mercurial. Moving to the base of the boot, you're gonna find their all-new Hyper Quick system, which makes up the sole plate as well as the stud pattern. Now, the sole plate is not truly a split sole in that the heel and forefoot bits are connected by way of a stiffener bar that, unlike the Mercurial, kind of runs slightly along the lateral side rather than directly down the middle, which the one variation you're gonna find in terms of the sole plate is one, this is flat. It doesn't have the anatomic shape of the Mercurial, which is a bit disappointing. I wish it would have that. That's, to me, one of the best features of the Mercurial that I feel like Nike should roll out on all their lines, but they don't for whatever reason. But because they've moved the stiffener bar to the lateral side, it does allow for a little bit more, I guess, flexibility in terms of torquing in this direction, where it's a little bit stiffer this way, where you'll find that with the Mercurial, it kind of feels just as stiff in either direction. As a whole, this feels more flexible than what you get with the Mercurials, but also doesn't feel groundbreaking in any way at all. It looks very spectacular, but feels pretty normal. And then as far as the stud pattern is concerned, this being the FG variation, again, it's very Mercurial-esque in terms of its layout as well as just the general shape of the studs. The little quirk they're going with here are these conical studs that have kind of been split down the middle and then slid in either direction, which kind of gives you this very futuristic kind of conical stud type design. The end result is a stud that still feels very bladed in terms of how it digs into the ground, but also still provides some freedom to twist and pivot. According to Nike, this is the most efficient stud pattern that they've developed for lateral changes of direction. So unlike the Mercurial, which is more kind of geared towards accelerating and decelerating in a straight line as quickly as possible, this is really designed for moving from side to side. It's difficult for me to say that this feels significantly better for that specific movement type versus a pair of Mercurials, but that's really the closest comparison. It is a slightly less aggressive variation of the Mercurial stud pattern, and overall, well above average as far as overall traction is concerned. And then as far as weight is concerned, the boots feel light, but definitely nothing crazy. I'm gonna weigh them for you today in real time. In a size 9.5 US, you can see that the Phantom GT Elite Low weighs in at 7.6 ounces, the equivalent of 216 grams, which is heavier than the Mercurial, which is a boot that I've done a lot of comparison with. So they're not quite as light as Nike's flagship speed boot, but they're on par from a weight perspective to what we had with really the Phantom Vision and the Phantom Venom. Even though it is significantly different design-wise from both of those boots, the weight is pretty much identical. And if you're looking for a lightweight feel in general, you're gonna get it from these. So as you can see, I've swapped out the stock white laces, which do look good, but they're gonna get dirty really easily along with the white Flyknit underneath, but we're not gonna talk about that. And I've changed them for some neon pink reflective SR4U replacement laces, which obviously match the pink accents on the boots really nicely, add the reflective bits, and they just make your boots look different from everybody else with the exact same pair, especially with launch colorways because they tend to be pretty popular. It's a great way of changing up the style of your boots in a very inexpensive way. If you're interested in some for yourself, the website to visit is www.sr4ulaces.com. There'll be a little pop-up on screen as well as a link down below in the description. So if you're interested in some, be sure to go ahead and check that out. On feet, the Phantom GTs do have some familiar aspects about them when compared to other Nike boots, but they also feel distinctly different in a lot of ways. The one thing that strikes me as feeling somewhat similar is the thin Flyknit upper, which is very reminiscent to what you're gonna find on the Mercurials, although the upper does not wrap your foot as closely, meaning that the boots don't fit as tight, and there's no extra reinforcement materials like Flywire or Brio cables or the high tenacity yarns like you find on the Mercurial Vapors right now. So it's just less structured, which means that they're not quite as responsive, but that could actually enhance the overall comfort, and it does allow for a little bit of extra width, which definitely seems to be what Nike was going for here with this brand new shape, which is unlike the previous two variations of the Phantom. These are definitely wider than both the Vision as well as the Venom. There's no question about that. The one thing that I will complain about is the way that the upper kind of wraps your foot. You can see right here between these two lacing positions, you get this kind of ugly bulge and crease Maybe it's just my feet, but it's something to look out for if you do plan on getting a pair of these. Not something that's detrimental to the feel or performance, but it just doesn't look the best. And then you'll also notice here on the medial side, you get a pretty good fold-in material, which I don't normally find in a lot of football boots. And that's, again, just due to the wider shape that Nike has given these. So I don't really have super wide feet. I'm slightly flat-footed, so maybe that's the reason for the crease here. And you can see when I bend my foot, there's just a lot of extra material. It doesn't feel like there's too much volume, but when you move the lacing system to the side, you leave more open material, you're gonna have bigger creasing. It's just kind of the nature of the design that they've gone for. Again, it looks worse than it actually feels, but it is something worth pointing out. As far as width is concerned, like I said, these have some decent width to them. The upper feels like a Mercurial, but they are significantly wider. So if you have wide feet, this is definitely going to be your best option within the Nike lineup, even more so than the Tiempos. Like I said, wider than both the Vision and the Venom that they replace, which is not a bad thing. I'm sure a lot of people will actually be excited about that. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and I would say that these run a touch longer than all the other Nike models. So if you're wearing a Nike boot right now and they fit you pretty much perfectly, I would personally recommend sticking with the same size. Or if you're wearing a Nike model in a specific size right now and you feel like there's a little bit of extra room, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to go a half size down in the Phantom GT. So it's a little bit tricky because I would say it's only maybe like a quarter size difference. For most people, I would recommend staying true to size. I think that's going to be the best bet for you. For me, that's definitely what works. I actually tried these in a half size smaller, a size 9 US, just to see what they were like, and they were a little bit too small for me. So again, going true to size for most people is what I would recommend. Just be aware that they do run about a quarter size large, which is weird for Nike, but that's what they've done. So in conclusion, while the Phantom GT Elite is by no means a groundbreaking pair of football boots, I think it's a welcome addition to Nike's current lineup, simply based on the fact that there have been tons of people screaming for Nike to make a wide fit variation of the Nike Mercurial for a very long time now. And effectively, what they've given us with the Phantom GT is just that. It is a thin Flyknit upper, almost exactly like the current Mercurial, with a Soleplate and stud pattern that's almost exactly like the current Mercurial, in a package that's very lightweight overall, not quite exactly like the Mercurial, but close enough, with a much wider fit. It's far from perfect, and objectively, I don't think it's as responsive or as locked in or really as good in terms of like peak performance characteristics as the Mercurial Vapor or Superfly that's currently available. But if you have wider feet, plus you appreciate the addition of that texturing for some extra grip on the ball, if that sounds like something that you'd like, then that's exactly what the Phantom GT is. Personally, I was hoping for something that felt a little bit more like the OG Hypervenom Phantom 1, which Nike kind of hinted at with their marketing material and certainly the graphics that really remind me a lot of that OG Hypervenom, but the end result is a product that doesn't really capture the same magic in terms of overall comfort and really the way that the boot fits in general. That would be my main gripe, in that the shape of the boot along with the angle of the lacing system doesn't seem to work with my foot shape as well as I would like it to, although I think that'll vary a lot from person to person. But as it stands, I think I prefer the Phantom GT over both the Venom and the Vision that it replaces. And in Nike's current lineup as a whole, while it's not as different from the Mercurial as I would like it to be, I think it's a pretty solid option. And overall, while it's not as high tech as Nike claims it to be, I'm pretty happy with them. Anyways, guys, that's it for my review. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. Again, if you're interested in a pair of these for yourself, you can click the first link down below. That's going to take you to the review page on my website, where you'll find buy it now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes, where you'll be able to pick these up below their normal $250 retail price. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask them down below in the comment section. I'll do my best to get an answer out to you. If you aren't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.